Now, a simple definition of parenting is the process of promoting and supporting the physical, emotional, social, and intellectual development of a child from infancy to adulthood. Parenting style can affect everything from how much a child weighs to how the child feels. Thus, it is very important to ensure that parenting style is supportive of healthy growth and development.
Since parenting and social protection goes hand in hand, social protection is essential in preventing and reducing poverty for children and families. It also helps in addressing inequalities and in realizing children's rights.
So despite recent progress in many parts of the world, too many children live in poverty and are deprived of their most elementary rights. In Nigeria, measures are being put in place to ensure that parenting and social security are very essential and valuable. So joining us now for more on parenting and social security is Taiwo Akinlami, a legal practitioner, a UNICEF advocate. Great to have you, Taiwo. It's always a pleasure.
Thank you so much for having
me. Happy New Year.
Same to you. I think it's my second time here.
Okay.
Yes.
January 1st.
January 1st, okay.
We did projection for the year.
Okay.
Yes.
Great. But Taiwo, let's just go straight to it and let's have this conversation. There's a very big problem as regards the developmental phase of every child in this country. Yes. I mean, we can go through the myriad of factors, mortality rates and the likes. I mean, the numbers are stacked against us. But how can we re-engineer the childhood of an average Nigerian child?
Well, I think that's a major project. It's a project that that will be for a lifetime. For example, British Council says that in children learning the basics, what makes them relevant for the 21st century workplace, we are 2 generations behind schedule. So when we are 2 generations behind schedule, it means if you look at the Bible says generation is 40 years. So if I choose English dictionary says generation is 30 years. So I choose the lesser evil, which is 30 years, a generation, which means we are 60 years behind schedule. Now, the truth of the matter is that as we journey on in the responsibility of providing a future and a hope for our children, there seems to be no improvement. Things seem to be getting worse than getting better. So in 2010 or thereabout, before this government came into power, Nigeria has the 10.5 million Nigerian children were out of school. But now, as of today, we've grown to 13.5 million, and we are still growing. And since 2015, and even now, there seems to be no definite and clearly stated policies and programs of government, both in terms of formulation and in terms of implementation and budgetary allocation, vis-a-vis the recommendation of UNESCO as to the percentage of national budget that must go into education. All of that is there. Then you look at health, you look at shelter, you look at every area of our lives. So you find that conversations like this must be held. Apart from being held, conversations like this must be interested also in profiling certain way forward for the emancipation of our children. And the first thing I think we need to do is that this conversation has to be had more regularly. We need to put this conversation in public domain to understand that our children are not being raised, they are being erased. You know, because you see, when you have a country where 87 million Nigerians are living on less than $1.9 per day, when you have a situation where, you know, governments are owing salaries of parents. You know, something evil happened in Osun State, where you know it's a civil servant prone state, and for months government did not pay salaries. Apart from the fact that government did not pay salary, now children were to resume in school. Government now said for children to resume, they must produce their parents' tax clearance. If people are not collecting salary, you're supposed to deduct pay as you earn from source. For 7 months, you have not paid salary. You are now saying that children of hewers of wood and drawers of water, the Oipoloi, should show up in school with tax clearance certificate. Where are they going to get it from? Parents that were not being paid. So these are issues that need to come to the fore. We need to have this conversation again and again so that, you know, those who are responsible can begin to take responsibility.
Indeed. I hear social protection for children and social protection for even their parents and what you've just said. So it's social protection for all. But according to UNICEF, 2 out of 3 children worldwide are not covered by any form of social protection. So this is a global challenge, not just in Nigeria. But tell us, when you say social protection, is it the same as social security? What exactly is social protection, and why is it important for a country like Nigeria to have this conversation, and beyond conversations, implement social protection? Okay.
Now, let me start from the recommendation of International Labour Organization. In 2010 or thereabouts, International Organization was interested in solving the problem of child labor globally. And after rigorous conversations and research and all of that, they came up with the fact that since 2010, that social protection is one of the ways to solve child labor, to stop children from being engaging in labor, any form of labor that is damaging to their health, personal development, health development, and all of that, and their rights and all of that. Now, what is social protection? It's provision of basic amenities for parents, health amenities, education, shelter, electricity, and a whole lot of things provided for parents, so that when parents have access to all of this, they are able to focus on the primary responsibility of a primary parent. You see, because when you talk about parents, there are 4 institutions responsible for parenting. And the first institution is the institution we call the family. It is the primary. You know, people often say family is first, family is first. Family is not first in everything. Family is first in inculcating positive value system in their children. That's the first responsibility of the family. Then followed by the community. The community, in the community, you have the media, you have the church, you have the mosque, you have the neighbors. Now, the community's responsibility is to reinforce those customs that are common to the family, and so that it becomes a culture at the level of the community. Then you have the state. The state is to provide level playing field in terms of policies and provision of all of these amenities, education. Now, there's no nation on earth where the responsibility of raising children in terms of providing for the needs, physical, emotional, social needs of children are on the shoulder of the parents. There's no meaningful nation on earth. There's no nation on earth where the responsibility of providing, where private education is an alternative to public education. Now, private education is always available. Now, public education is always available. Those who want the luxury of private education, go for it. Now, public health is always available. Those who want the luxury of private health will go for it. Now, let me give you a quick example. There's a guy called Jack Welch. Jack Welch worked for General Electric all his life. He rose to become the CEO. Now, one day, Jack Welch had an heart attack, and he was being rushed to his hospital where he registered, private hospital. But as he was being rushed, they saw a community hospital by the side because it was an emergency. They rushed him there. That's why he was resuscitated. That's why he came round. That's why he was treated, and that's why he was discharged from. Now, imagine that I live in Magodo Phase 2. Something happens to me that is an emergency. I'm being rushed to my hospital where I registered, and my wife says, let's go to K2 public hospital. That is death sentence. Now, so the point is that Jack Welch did not register in a private hospital because the public hospitals were not working. He registered in private hospital because he's from the upper crust. He's an elite. So he wanted a treatment, not medical treatment necessarily, but a treatment that relates with luxury. That's what you can get in private hospital. So the point I'm making is this. Look at it all over the world. Now, for example, in Iceland, 18 years ago, their youths were messing up. They were not doing well. And the government sat down to look at how do we solve this problem of our youth not doing well. Now, they asked the question because for every social problem, there's what we call root causes. They looked at the root causes, and they found that the reason why children were messing up, young people were messing up, most of the children were messing up were children whose parents did not have time with. So they started a scheme. Spend 1 hour with your child, you get also get paid. And that program ran for the first 5 years of that program. They achieved a great difference in the behavioral pattern and the way those young people were behaving. So now you find a situation here. When I started talking about children, I used to tell parents, why did you bring children to this world when you know you don't have the resources? But this is the question. Even if you have one child in Nigeria today, my friend the other day called me, who has a twin. And she lives in Dolphin because she works in a school. And she says, the fee of my children in nursery school, because these children are like 4-year-old or 3-year-old, 4-year-old, is 300K, 300,000 naira per child. She's asking me, what work do you want me to do? How much is the school where I'm working pay me? How do I do all of this? But in other climes, some of these responsibilities have been taken over by the state so that parents can focus on their primary responsibility. So what I'm saying is that take a look at Somalia, a failed state. Take a look at Afghanistan. Take a look at Yemen. Take a look at Syria, 9 years of civil war. Now, take a look at all of those countries. Picture parenting in those places, but we don't need to go too far. Take a look at Northeast. Nigeria. Take a look at parenting in that place. Can parenting take place in IDP camps? Can parenting take place where bombs are being dropped on a daily basis and you don't know what is next? Can parenting take place where parents are taken away and their children are nowhere to be found? Now, many displaced children are today. So what I'm saying, we can't kid ourselves. Now, this is my point. We need to redefine parenting in Nigeria. Now, see,
how do we do that?
Now, this is the point. In the developed countries, there are definitions that don't, in the dictionary, that don't work for us here. For example, if you define government, an average first world person understands what government is from the dictionary. And note, those who wrote those dictionaries wrote it from their own social experiences. Here, when you talk about government is a place where you go to be rich. If you can be poor now, then if you get into government, you can be rich. Now, when you talk about school is supposed to be responsible for development. Now, but physical, social development and all of that. But school here is a place where you go and the little life in you is snuffed out, to a very large extent, because there's no regulation going on there. When I was in school, I was named noisemaker. Every day I was beaten. Look at all that I contain. Look at all that I can say. I was beaten. I was almost killed for being a noisemaker because they could not recognize the kind of gift I was displaying. Thank God, who has a major plan beyond what the commitment of those guys. So this.
As I was saying, the parenting. How can we
redefine parenting?
So we need to redefine parenting. I've been writing a series in my blog. It's a 15 series, but yesterday I did the 8th edition. I'm talking about rethinking parenting in Nigeria, and I'm saying that what we need to do first is to agree that parenting is not does not reside only with the parents. That is the biological parents, the father and the mother.
Because we need to go over
yes.
break.
Number 2 is the fact that we need to involve other. It's a 4-dimensional responsibility.
Yeah,
all those dimensions. We need to involve them as a matter of necessity. It's a duty.
Okay.
Number 3, we need to begin to lead an advocacy, agitating for our rights. You don't need to die carrying the burden of paying school fees. Now, while you are doing that, you need to begin to speak out. Now, if you register your child in a private school, for example, you need to begin to ask critical questions because customers are always right.
Okay, Mr. Akinlami, we'll go on a break so that we don't digress. Yeah. We'll look at this social protection and what the Nigerian government has done so far. Because some will say, even the school feeding program is a system of social protection in itself. But we'll come back to talk some more. Stay with us. You're watching The Morning Show here on the Rise News. Welcome back to The Morning Show here on the Rise News. And we're still talking social security, especially for the Nigerian child. And Taiwo Akinlami, a legal practitioner, UNICEF consultant, and child rights advocate, is still with us in the studio. Thank you so much, Mr. Akinlami, for staying with us. Before that break, we'll talk so much about, you've said what social protection is. You've talked about parenting. But there are those who will say Nigeria, as with many other countries, have the responsibility for competing needs. You're talking about inflation, you're talking about poverty, you're talking about security, infrastructure, and this conversation about social security or social protection is not on the front burner. But there are also those who will say the Nigerian government has taken a step to include children for a healthier future. For instance, they will say the school feeding program in Nigeria is a social protection system in itself. Yeah. Do you agree?
Also the cash transfer.
Conditional cash transfer. Cash transfer is another one.
Well, there's no, so when you talk about children, there's no one child who lives in proxy for another. When you write WAEC, when children write WAEC and you say our school scored 70%, success rates. What about those 30%? Is the life of the 30% in proxy for the 70%? What we are saying, you don't need to go too far. I'm writing a piece in my blog this morning. I call it "Health is Wealth." Whose wealth? Whose health? Because the question is, I have personal stories of children who have become victims of the medical system, because the problem is not the seriousness of their ailment. The problem is lack of coping capacity of the system. So when you talk about the school feeding program, yes, it's good, but the question is, how many children benefit from the school feeding program? The school feeding program is something, it's abracadabra. The more you see, the more you look, the less you see. Now, in a country like India, one of the ways they've encouraged children to come to school, to improve attendance. Now, the problem in India is not that there were no schools. The problem is that people were not interested in coming. And one of the things they did was to formulate this policy of feeding children. And they realized that since they started feeding children, attendance increased. Now, this is the issue. When the children we are feeding, what are the social indices? What led to the whole idea of feeding children in school? What were we trying to achieve? Now, how long is this process going to continue? Now, the children that are not in school, what is the plan to put them in school? So if there's 13.5 million Nigerian children out of school, it means there's no school, right? If there's no school, now that is the combination of the figure being handled by private and public schools. Now, for example, in Lagos State, you have over 18,000 private schools competing with 1,700 public schools. Now, for a very long time, if you go to from Lekki side to Ajah, other side, you can't find government presence there when it comes to schools. Now, this is the point. If all of these are there, now, at the end of the day, what you find is that if we are looking at, okay, what is the way forward? If there are 13.5 million Nigerian children out of school,
isn't this argument very simplistic? And this is why I say that. Yes. Part of those 13.5 million that you're claiming, but that number has been disputed. A lot of them say it's 10 million. You have people that are in Al-Majri schools in that 13.5. So it's not that completely that they are not in schools. Then Al-Majri is just another form of education. And you are seeing now they want to codify the Al-Majri to make it better. It's not a very simplistic argument you're making in answering her question.
But this is the point. If, let's even say there's 1 million children out of school, let's leave the argument about the figure. Let's say there are even 1 million, 2 million. We accept there are children out of school.
Yes.
Now, the people in Al-Majri school are there. Now, there are children in IDP camps who are receiving one form of education or the other, either formal or informal. There are NGOs trying to work at that level. Now, this is the point. If there is one child left out of school or 10 children out of school, the question means there's no school for them to go. If there's no school for them to go, so the question should be, how many classrooms do we need to build? If we know how many classrooms we need to build, how many teachers do we need to hire? If you know how many teachers we need to hire, what kind of training are we supposed to subject all of these teachers? These are questions we should be asking. Now, Nigeria wants to borrow a huge amount of money. Now, $500 million out of that money is going to refurbish NTA. NTA is not a business venture. It's being supported by government. But again, we want to plunge. I would have thought that if you have problem with a business, you want to borrow money, to be able to help the business to grow so that you can deliver dividends to your investors. But that's what we want to do now. In all of this money we want to borrow, there's no conversation as to how do we remove our children from the streets. There's no conversation as to how do we change the fate of our children. It is about refurbishing NTA. It's about refurbishing a part of the National Assembly. It's about things that do not translate to the tangible need of the ordinary man on the street. Those are fundamental issues. Now, let me take it so when I talk about parents, I talk about both parents in the upper crust and in the lower crust. Now, the people in the upper crust have found a way out in the sense that they send their children to private school. When they finish here, they can send them abroad. They register their children in hospitals and all of that. But yet, they still go through a lot because the burden of sending your children to school is high. Then you now look at the children in the lower crust, people in Tabon, Ologun, Forogi, all of those places where the existence of their parents is already abused. So when Fashola was in government, the deputy governor had a press conference. And the purpose of the press conference is that Lagos State government was declaring war on child abuse. And I was opportune to be at that conference because I'm the Secretary General of Child Protection.
Actually, if I can just come in here, sorry, if I could just ask one question before you are done talking. Let's talk about the social welfare services. Now, this act was enacted as far back as 1974 in Nigeria. However, as it stands, there's no social welfare scheme, or rather, it's been neglected as a component of public healthcare services. Now, is there anything UNESCO is doing about this? And if there isn't this a conversation that needs to be had? We can see that the social welfare services structure works in the United States, at least to an extent. About 40% of people that go into that structure come out with, foster parents and good education. But we have nothing of the sort. Walking down the street today, I'm seeing these 3-year-olds begging for alms. The minute they are spotted, shouldn't they be taken off the streets and taken into social welfare services?
I agree with you. That should be the case. I mean, social welfare is on paper here, but when it comes to implementation of it, it's a major problem. Now, time will fail us to go into why it is so. It is again because of the fact that, you see, the welfare and the security of the people shall be the primary aim of government. That is the Constitution of Nigeria, 1999 Constitution as amended. But it therefore means that when government cannot take care of the welfare and the security of the people, the government has failed. If government has failed, it cannot enforce sovereignty. If government cannot enforce sovereignty, then it means the state is failing or it has failed. Now, if a nation cannot provide for its own young, cannot make adequate provision, you see, there's no such thing as emergency. What you call emergency is lack of coping capacity. In the developed countries of the world, before children are born, their lives have been planned. There are things, in Japan, for example, maybe the life expectancy is over 80 years, so they plan the life of the child. In Italy, if you give birth to a child, when the school age in Italy is 6 years, the day the child turns 6 years old, if the child does not show up in any school, the day after, social welfare people and police are going to show up at your door and ask questions because there's a database. So the question is that all of these things are not in place. And you see, when you talk about UNICEF and international organizations, you see, if you read Dambisa Moyo, the title of our book is The Dead AIDS. Dambisa Moyo I think she's from Kenya. She lives in America.
She's Zambian.
She lives in America.
Zambian American, Harvard trained.
Yes, and she has said that begging AIDS is not the way forward for Africa. There's no continent that has collected aid and has risen out of poverty. Because those who give you aid have their own plan and their purposes for which they are giving you. We've collected from America. We have collected from Europe. Now we are collecting from China. We are collecting money from everywhere. And it pains me that some of these organizations giving us money are aware of our state. You have a father who is a drunk, who does not take care of his children. And it comes to you to borrow money. You still give him money.
These problems are highlighted. We know all these problems. We can talk about them from now to high heavens, but we're talking solutions.
Yes.
How can we bring about, social safety net for people in this country? Let's talk solutions.
Now,
we know all of this.
Number one,
yes.
You see, if your diagnosis will precede your
we know the diagnosis.
solution.
Let's talk solutions.
And now, so the way forward is first for people to know these issues. Now that we know the problem, again, might be something that the elite will be able to talk about properly. Many people do not. The majority of the people must understand what the issues are. So my own commitment is first, let's open the eyes of the people to understand the issues. After understanding the issues, then you begin to demand for your rights. Now, how do you demand for your rights? We need to have more of town hall meetings. We need to have more of conversation and discussions. We need to know the people who are responsible for our leadership, and we need to know how to hold them responsible. We need to know people who say we should patronize Nigerian products and will not buy Nigerian cars and will go and spend more money to buy foreign cars. We need to have all of those conversations because, you see, children are not existing in vacuum. Children are part of the system. Whatever injustice to all is injustice to one is injustice to all. A threat to one is a threat to all. injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. So if you understand that, we must have conversation. One of the things we don't get in this country is that we don't discuss. When we don't discuss, we don't know what the issues are. When we don't know what the issues are, when we even discuss, we misplace priorities. We have to begin to call on those who we have elected or selected or appointed to take responsibility for the welfare and the security of the government, of the people. So the next time somebody comes to you to say, vote me in, you must judge the programs and the policies by the welfare and the security of the people. How does this lead to the welfare and the security of the people? So they begin every I don't want to use that word, I don't want to use every change. I don't want to use advocacy. I don't want to use revolution. Every change, in the world begins with a conversation, understanding the problems, and now people taking responsibility. Nobody is going to save our children for us. Nobody is going to change this country for us.
We know that now. Advocacy, taking responsibility. What else? Yes.
Now there has to be alternative plan. For example, we are developing. If we say social protection, now in the health sector, what are the alternatives we are presenting to government? In South Africa, they presented the Freedom Charter to say these are alternatives to what the apartheid government was doing. So we need to go beyond armchair criticism and provide alternatives. Then lastly, within your own area of influence, the much that you can do, you need to begin to do that, because it is that your contribution in your area of influence that we metamorphose or increase in other areas.
The protection of children is everyone's responsibility. Thank you so much, Mr. Akinlami, for coming on the show this morning.